I warned the first service that I got nothing but fire and lightning for us today. So, yeah, content warning. Since the election last year, I've been observing the reactions within this congregation and society at large to the rapid changes brought on by our current government. Within our church and some sectors of America, there is great shock. I hear the alarm. I see the tears. A new anxiety has gripped swaths of America. People are afraid of losing their jobs, their savings, or more existentially, afraid that the freedoms that they have come to know may be taken away. The minister in me sees that fear, hears the trembling voices, and my first instinct is to comfort and support. It is my calling in life. But I also feel a growing disconnect. I see the existential uncertainty rising among many of you, and the question that arises within me is, why now? Why do they feel that now? Because that feeling, that understanding that I can lose everything, my livelihood, my freedom, my very life at a moment's notice with no recourse, I have known it for a long time. My mama taught it to me, and life confirmed it. Her parents taught it to her, their parents to them, on back some 400 years. So if you walk into a black barbershop and listen until politics comes up, you might hear some concern, but you will also hear apathy. And if you ask them about the current political situation, they might ask you in turn, what's changed? How is now different? And if you stay long enough, you might even hear some gratitude for the president and the chaos that he brings. Because now, perhaps with this new practical experience, white folks might begin to be able to imagine what black folks have been perceiving and feeling for a long time. The background tick of dread. Because the MAGA people, well, they're right about one thing. There is something deeply and pervasively wrong in America and the world, and that wrongness needs to be torn. They call it the deep state, like some underwater monster, and it is a monster. They've just misidentified it. It's not the immigrants, or the trans kids, or the vaccines, or the community arts project killed off without funding from the National Endowment for the Arts. No. The monster is, was, and will continue to be, unless we do something about it, white supremacy. I saw a joke recently from Poorly Drawn Lines. It's a webcomic. In it, a diver asks a seahorse, "Do you like living in the ocean?" And the seahorse responds, "I don't know what that is." So the diver explains, "It's this. Everything around you, the creatures and the plants and all the water," to which the seahorse asks, "All the what?" The joke, of course, being that to a seahorse, the waters of the ocean aren't an ocean, they're just reality. And so it is with white supremacy. So present as to be nearly invisible. Or put another way, white supremacy isn't the shark, it's the water. And if all we know is water, how hard is it to imagine another way of life? How hard is it to imagine dry land? However, if we learn to perceive it, we can begin to imagine our way out of it. Let's begin with a definition from the work of Shaniqua Walker Barnes in her book, I Bring the Voices of My People. White supremacy is a systematic way of ordering society, ideology, and relationships so that economic, cultural, and social dominance accrue to white people. I'll say it again. White supremacy is a systematic way of ordering society, ideologies, and relationships so that economic, cultural, and social dominance accrue to white people. Under the structure of white supremacy, white people, their bodies, aesthetics, beliefs, customs, and culture are made inherently superior to other races, and as such should wield dominion over all of creation. That's a lot. So let me simplify it with a question. And if you were here in the first service, you can't answer. Do you know the greatest benefit of whiteness? Not just here in the States, but almost anywhere in the world. What do you think? Shout it out. Freedom. There you go. Who said it? Freedom. The answer is freedom. The greatest benefit of whiteness is freedom. White folks are free. You'll never have to worry about being rolled up in an ICE raid because you look Salvadorian. No cop is going to throw you against the wall to check your ID. Your ancestors never had to carry freedom papers. White folks can buy anything, go anywhere, and demand compliance with assumed authority to do so. Who was here on Christmas? Raise your hand. Who was here on Christmas this year? Okay. You remember when the Catholic churchgoers parked in all of our spots and we had no spots left? I went over there twice to ask them to move. The first time I went by myself, asked, and nothing happened. The second time I went with my friend Joe Tremble, who happens to be big, tall, and white. 5 minutes later, an avalanche of people came pouring down the road to move their cars. What happened? I said the same thing both times. Why did it work the second time? So here's the hard thing. Under the structure of white supremacy, whiteness equals freedom, while blackness equals enslavability. All other non-white people exist within the spectrum between the two. For races and individuals, the closer you are to whiteness, the more access to freedom and power you have. Closeness to blackness produces the opposite effect unless you can package it and sell it. White supremacy preserves this structure. And even though white supremacy exercises this incredible power, it has been so successful at convincing the world of its normalcy. It is so normal that it can be difficult to identify. So today, I want to tell you about the 4 pillars of white supremacy so that you know when you see the beast. As a Unitarian Universalist, I do not believe in hell or damnation, but I certainly believe in the devil. The pillars of white supremacy are commodification, extermination, demonization, and indoctrination. We'll take them one by one. Commodification, race-based control of humans as an economic product. American slavery, for example. The transatlantic slave trade did not invent slavery, but it did innovate it. Only in the transatlantic slave trade was slavery perpetual and race-based through matrilinear lines. The child of an enslaved black woman in America, North or South, was born a slave, gave birth to slaves whose children were slaves. The matrilineal part is important because it gave white men access to the black female body without the risk of creating free children. The enslavability of black bodies did not end with the abolishment of slavery. It continues today in the form of mass incarceration. See, the 13th Amendment reads, "Neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States." Meaning that the amendment which abolishes slavery carves out a specific exception for the incarcerated. This is important when we consider that black people in this country are imprisoned and incarcerated at multiples of the rate of white people. In Maryland, black people account for 30% of the population, and they account for 72% of its prisoners. Every one of those human bodies is worth money. The state pays for every day of their incarceration. Thus, the black men who form 80% of incarcerated individuals with sentences longer than 10 years in Maryland are a very valuable commodity. Meanwhile, brown-skinned migrants from the Caribbean, Central, and South America have largely replaced black people in the fields and in the kitchens. But they're kept in a kind of permanent legal limbo, unable to advocate for their rights or organize due to fear of deportation or arrest. Second, extermination. When white supremacy encounters black and brown bodies in control of land it wants to hold or control, it exterminates. The ethnic cleansing of the indigenous people of America, for example. However, the extermination of the American Indians is not a historical fact. It is ongoing. There are 5.5 million enrolled tribal citizens in the United States. That is nearly the population of Maryland. So why are they talked about like a historical artifact? Why are their opinions on contemporary issues completely unknown to us? Why are they almost completely ignored in the contemporary political conversation? By treating the indigenous people as extinct, they are exterminated again and again and again. Then there's Gaza and the president's proposal to turn it into, quote, the Riviera of the Middle East. As for its inhabitants, the Gazans will be, quote, resettled in far safer and more beautiful communities. That sounds dangerously like reservations to me. Exterminate and occupy. Third, demonization, which occurs when the interests of white supremacy collide with a group that it cannot immediately commodify or exterminate. The migrants must become gangsters, rapists, murderers, before the state can deport them en masse. Iraq had to become the axis of evil before invasion, complete with imaginary weapons of mass destruction. But a more difficult example is Afghanistan, the war even Barack Obama called the righteous war, where we fought the Taliban, an enemy of our own creation. And I had the same pause in the first service. I just want to double check in with everyone. We are all aware that the Taliban was a group trained and funded by the United States in the 80s to fight against the Soviets. That's common knowledge, right? We all know that? Good. We fought that enemy for 20 years as a response to the 9/11 attacks. But I would like to remind us all that 15 of the 19 men who attacked us were from Saudi Arabia, a nation that we have incredibly close ties to this day, while none, 0%, were from Afghanistan. After 20 years of feeding American youth and the entire population of Afghanistan into that grinder of conflict, the Taliban remain the government of Afghanistan. Perhaps the only victors in that conflict were the corporate recipients of $2.3 trillion we spent to fight it. Companies whose boards and leaderships are overwhelmingly white. And only one person thought to question the logic of the conflict to near universal condemnation of her peers. Representative Barbara Lee. You mind putting her up there for me? There she is. Beautiful lady. So as usual, the role of being the conscience of America fell to a black lady. Finally, indoctrination. Walker Barnes states that indoctrination occurs when non-white people are forced to adopt white cultural norms. Good examples of this would be the prohibition of drumming or traditional languages among the enslaved population or Indian boarding schools. We could also count Japanese concentration camps. But limiting our understanding of indoctrination to brute force policies misses its full scope. We should understand indoctrination as a collective force which positions people, especially non-white people, to uphold the system of white supremacy. So, for me to really reckon with this pillar is to reckon with my own complicity with white supremacy. For example, how much of my government retirement account is invested in the same defense corporations that I just condemned? How much of your retirement account is invested in these same corporations? I owe the beginning of my career to the War on Terror, because the expansion in our nation's security apparatus included hiring me. I was never stupid. I knew I was part of the machine, but I wanted access to the middle-class money, security, and respect possible within the system. So I had to play the game. I had to play my part in white supremacy. And let me tell you that the scariest part about turning in my shiny federal agent badge to go to seminary wasn't the loss of income. It was the loss of safety. Because without the special passports, the IDs, the shiny badges, I'm just another black man in America. And again, this next line I took out, I put it in, I took it out, I put it in. But I got to tell you that I know at least some small part of the decision after leaving the federal government as a special agent to enter again into the United States Navy, to go to boot camp as a 37-year-old man, was driven by the desire to regain the status and protection that I lost. You will never feel safer as a black man in this country than you feel as when you are wearing navy dress whites. That uniform is crisp and white. And where you walk, eyes turn. White people stop you in the street to thank you for your service. But the moment I take it off, it's just me. To realize my own complicity with white supremacy, it takes knowledge, willingness to experience discomfort, and imagination. I had to let my mind go free enough to imagine that another life is possible. It is a feat of imagination to say, you know what? I don't need to do this anymore. But that's what it takes. the willing entrance into discomfort, and the willingness to imagine. White supremacy has had 400 plus years to entrench itself here and around the globe. It may take 400 plus years to dig it back out. I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't know what will replace it. But I do know that we have to stop building it up unchecked. The hard truth is that white supremacy has adapted to our old methods of political action. White supremacy is completely unthreatened by our Saturday afternoon demonstrations. Our electoral options are so narrowed by the structure of white supremacy that positive change is rarely on the ballot. If I wanted to vote for a president who didn't support the extermination of the Palestinians, who would I have voted for? Riviera Man? Or the administration that sent millions in lethal munitions to Israel with no conditions? Who was I going to vote for to help me end mass incarceration of black people? Trump? Harris the prosecutor? Or the man who wrote the 1994 crime bill, which eliminated higher education grants to prisoners, expanded the death penalty, and more than doubled the U.S. prison population, Joe Biden? And I didn't have time for this morning, and I'm going to make some of y'all mad right now. Because we're all up in arms about the deportations that are happening right now. But can anyone name the president who deported more people than anyone else in the history of this country? Barack Obama. Voting, peaceful protest, those are important. But we're going to have to imagine harder if we truly want to overcome. I know people are devising new methods of political and social action, and we should support that innovation, even if that means trying things that fail. As long as we learn and we do better next time, even if we fail again, we are moving forward. We certainly can't try the same things that don't work and hope for different outcomes. But we must do more than just imagine new battle tactics. We must give ourselves the permission to dream. I remember once there was a man who stood in front of a pulpit and said, "I have a" what? Dream. What kind of world do we want to live in? We have to imagine answers to that question, because if we don't, white supremacy is ready to give us an answer of perpetual inequality and avarice, where few benefit, but all of us are underwater. So imagine us free. Ashe, amen.